so if you just watch the anime, prepare to get spoiled if you continue watching. The idea behind today's theory is that Horikoshi, the author of Boku no Hero, might in fact be setting up a tournament of villains, a battle for supremacy. Now, while I believe strongly in the idea of this occurring eventually, I'm not sure exactly when it will occur. It could be important to the next arc, it could be important many arcs down the road, it could get a hint to it in the next arc, and then a huge, gigantic skip. All that I really want to convey to you is that Horikoshi seems to be setting something like this up. It's difficult to know exactly where to begin, so I just decided to start here. In chapter 125 of Boku no Hero, we got to see the first interaction between the Eightfold Cleansers and the Villain Alliance. After Chizaki arrived, we see the now deceased Magne ask Chizaki this question: "Are you another one of those types who's feeling high off of All Might's retirement?" And Overhaul says this: "No more so even than All Might. It's All for One's departure that's really big. He was the Emperor, the Kingpin who ruled the entire underworld. In other words, the Kingpin is now gone, from both the light and the shadows. Who will be the next Kingpin, I wonder?" Now, after this point in time, there was a lot of misinformation in my opinion. I'll go on to explain this further. And so it's very easy to see this conflict as a conflict between the Eightfold Cleansers, or the Eight Precepts of Death in Overhaul, and the Villain Alliance, or the League of Villains, and Shigaraki. But I think that there are many more players than just these two in this tournament to become the king. But as of right now, the only two groups that we are aware of that are making any plays are these two. Shigaraki said himself, "I'm the next Kingpin. I'm gathering up influence as we speak, and soon we're going to expand." So first off, I think at the very least, we should expect to see new members of the Villain Alliance soon. That's kind of what expand means. We also saw at the end of chapter 159 that Shigaraki has essentially intercepted the van carrying Overhaul. Is it even remotely possible for Overhaul to join the Villain Alliance? Certainly, he hasn't got anywhere else that it's possible for him to go because the Eightfold Cleansers are defeated. But this isn't really what I want to talk about. I suppose the point is this, is that the Kingpin ruling over the underworld is now gone, and all the various gangs are now seeking to obtain this position. We've seen the Villain Alliance and the Eightfold Cleansers make plays. The Eightfold Cleansers' plan revolved around this quirk nullification bullet and potential monopoly over it, while the Villain Alliance seems to be, initially at the very least, their plan centered around acquiring more members, and in general gaining power and influence. And now these two groups have their plans have come together, so that the Villain Alliance has their old plans plus Overhaul's plans. But I do think that it needs to be clarified that neither of these two groups at this exact moment are considered major players. Overhaul himself stated that the Eightfold Cleansers are a small-time gang, and yet he still believed the Eightfold Cleansers to be superior to the Villain Alliance. The Villain Alliance's strength is their reputation. Essentially, they're famous, but not necessarily strong. So if both of these groups are essentially small-time, then it would make sense that there are greater powers at large, groups far closer to becoming Kingpin. And this leads into what I perceive to be potential misinformation that Horikoshi has thrown in there to confuse us as to what's going on, but at the same time clarified very subtly. I think it's very important that as of right now, there are 3 drugs which seem to be major players in determining who might be the next Kingpin. The new player on the block was the Quirk Erasing Bullet. This was created by the Eightfold Cleansers, and they were the suppliers. But it's important that it is new and its finished product has yet to hit the streets. Remember that a gang derives a lot of its power off of the ability to control the supply of illegal goods. Gangs have territory, and they maintain their territory through use of force. If they aren't strong enough, somebody else will acquire their territory. Horikoshi has hinted at these kinds of battles of power twice so far recently in the story. One was between 2 rival gang members who both used a different kind of drug, a drug which gigantified them. It's also worth pointing out here that when we were first shown this battle, Horikoshi tried to give us the impression that they both had quirks which related to becoming bigger. But it was revealed later in chapter 135 that it was in fact a drug. The second time was where we saw Fat Gun, Kirishima, as well as Sun Eater fight a small-time gang. Before they actually ran into this gang, we hear the citizens say there's a fight that broke out. And we get to see somebody who is not shown say, idiots, who said you could do business on my turf? And it was actually during the second incident that we got introduced to the other major player, the other drug that is important, and that is the quirk-enhancing drug. But the small-time gangs have control over a small territory. The only reason that they have any power whatsoever is because they have access to suppliers. Suppliers who are supplying them with illegal goods for them to sell. The sale of illegal goods essentially creates the gang. Without the ability to make money, they would be forced to have real jobs. So they're at the bottom of the totem pole, and they just have communication and access to higher tiers. But the person or the group at the very top would be the supplier. This goes back into Overhaul's scheme. He wanted to make himself the supplier, because he had created something new and powerful. But ultimately, his group was not strong enough to maintain control over the supply. And now Shigaraki has it. But anyway, going back to the potential misinformation which I talked about a little bit earlier, Horikoshi gives this general impression that the Eightfold Cleansers are in control over the supply of not only the quirk-erasing bullets, but also potentially the giantification drug. And it isn't stated outright, but potentially also there's implications that they were in control over the quirk-enhancing drug. And one of the heroes says this: I guess that of the acts of organized crime that have been on the rise lately, the lion's share seem to be traceable back to the Eightfold Cleansers. The connection's still a little hazy though. It can maybe be construed that we're twisting things to make the cleansers the culprit at any cost. The Eightfold Cleansers responsible for the increase in the acts of organized crime lately? That is now almost definitively not the case. But this detail is very easily overlooked. The hero who expressed doubt about the evidence is essentially Horikoshi telling us at the time that there is more going on here. We even have future Deku tell us this in one of the narrator text box. The scope of it all got wider and wider, little by little. The Eightfold Cleansers were only responsible for the supply of the quirk-erasing bullets. That's it. So then there must be other organizations that are in control over the supply of the giantification and quirk-enhancing drugs. And I would suspect that this group, or these groups, are the other major players in the Tournament of Villains in order to become the next Kingpin. And I would imagine that each of these groups will be attempting to take control over the supply of all the other very important illegal substances. So let's say that there is a group that has control over the giantification drug. They amass power as well as a fortune by its sale. Then there's also a group which is in control over the quirk-enhancing drug. The same applies to them. And now we have a new player, Shigaraki, with the quirk-erasing bullets. I can really imagine that where Horikoshi might be going, sooner or eventually, is a sort of shadow war. The gang warfare which will determine who the Kingpin is. I really feel as though Shigaraki has moved on from his initial plans of attacking UA High, at least for right now. Remember that the only reason to attack UA was to defeat All Might, and his reasons for doing this were rather childish. But now that All Might has been defeated, it seems as though the Villain Alliance has developed new plans, new objectives. And if we can take what Shigaraki said around Chapter 70, one of his major goals is exposing just how fragile justice and all that other bullshit really are. But in order to crumble the entirety of society, he needs power and he needs influence, which is exactly what he stated he is searching for. And his actions have already drawn the attention of the police as well as Tsukauchi and Gran Torino, who are in charge of investigations relating to the Villain Alliance. But if his goal is power and influence, and if he aims to become the Kingpin, then he must surpass the other major players of the underworld. So the quirk-erasing bullet is a great start. In using that, he will become very powerful. It will undoubtedly make him more famous and instill fear in society at large. But he won't be the Kingpin. At least not yet. There are, as I said earlier, at least two other drugs which the control of the supply of these drugs will be important in determining who the Kingpin is. I think that this might be where Horikoshi goes next, Shigaraki acquiring the other major drugs. The continuation of the now created plot point of the gang warfare, and the significance of All For One getting captured. But anyway guys, that's pretty much all I had to say today. I thought that this was really interesting and wanted to share it. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with anything that I had to say or disagree, whether you have additional evidence or whatnot. Share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video. Dislike the video if you dislike the video. Subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.